Hello, class. Today we are going to be going over chapter 9, and that is the organization of the body of the speech. We're going to discuss why organization is important, discuss main points, supporting materials, which we've already kind of covered, and connectives. So why is organization important in your speech? Well, if your speech is well organized, then that will serve you a lot better because organization allows you and your listeners to see what ideas you have and pull the ones that are most important. Studies have shown that people who heard well organized speeches believe the speaker to be much more competent and trustworthy. So think of the speech like a movie, and you are the director. You have to make sure that your speech is well organized so that the listeners can follow the progression or the plot points from beginning to end. You want to use strategic organization. This is putting your speech together in a particular way to achieve a particular result with a particular audience. So you need to make sure that you're organizing your speech strategically. There are three parts of speech. You have your introduction. The goal of that one is to grab the attention of your audience. You have the body, which begins with your main points of your speech, which you'll be arranging them in a specific order. And then your conclusion, that summarizes the main points of your speech. So the very first step in developing a strong sense of speech organization is to understand these three parts and what the role is for each one. We'll start with the body of the speech because it is the longest part and the most important part. So you usually prepare the body first. After that, it's easier to then create an effective introduction after you already know exactly what you'll be saying in the body of your speech. So now let's talk about the main points. The process of organizing the body of a speech begins when you determine what are those main points you'll be covering. The main points are the central features of your speech. So you should select them carefully, you should phrase them precisely, and arrange them strategically. Here's an example. The specific purpose in the speech is to inform the audience about some of the major uses of hypnosis. The central idea or the residual message is three major uses of hypnosis today are to control pain in surgery, to help people stop smoking, and to help students improve their academic performance. So the main points here would be those: hypnosis used in surgery, hypnosis used to help people stop smoking, and hypnosis used to help students improve their academic performance. Here's a second example. So even if your main points are not stated expressly in your specific purpose, they may be easy to project from it. Let's say the specific purpose is to inform your audience of the basic steps in making stained glass windows. You know each of your main points will correspond to a step in that process. So it might look something like this: your specific purpose, to inform the audience of basic steps in making stained glass windows. Central idea, there are 4 steps in making stained glass windows. Your main points are going to be the first step, the second step, the third step, and the fourth step in that process. Number of main points. You will not have time in your speeches to develop more than 4 or 5 main points. Most speeches will contain only 2 or 3 main points. If, when you list your main points, you find that you have too many, you can condense them into categories. So here's an example of condensing. This specific purpose is to inform the audience about the practice of yoga. The central idea is yoga is an ancient practice that involves the whole body. So you'll notice here we have 8 main points, which is way too many. You have yoga breathing starts with, yoga breathing requires, yoga breathing includes, yoga breathing provides, yoga postures involve, yoga postures increase, yoga postures strengthen, and yoga postures demand. So with those 8 main points, which are too many, if you look closely, you'll see in this list that these actually fall into 2 broad categories: yoga and breathing, and yoga and postures. So therefore, what you can do is actually restate these with 2 main points. One part of practicing yoga involves proper breathing. Another part of yoga involves body postures. Now let's talk about the strategic order of main points. Once you've decided what your main points are going to be, then you have to decide in what order you will present them. So we'll review the 5 basic patterns of organization used by most speakers. We have chronological order, which we've already kind of discussed, spatial order, we've also discussed, causal order, problem solution order, and topical order, which we've also discussed. So chronological order, once again, that follows a time pattern. It may narrate a series of events in the sequence they happen, also used to explain a process or demonstrate how to do something. This is very useful for informative speeches. So an example of this pattern would be, say, listing steps in surgery. Then we have the spatial pattern. That follows a directional pattern. So it would be something where the main points proceed from top to bottom, left to right, front to back, inside to outside, east to west, or some other route. So normally it takes like a direction if you're covering maybe the Midwest states, and you will then list those from north to south or south to north. Another example would be maybe the 3 major parts of a hurricane and then list those, or the 3 major regions in Italy. So those are examples of spatial order. Then you have causal order. That is used to show a cause and effect relationship. Typically, when you use this order, you have 2 main points. One deals with the cause of something, the other deals with its effects. Depending on your topic, sometimes you'll start with the cause, sometimes you might need to start with the effects. Here's an example: shortage of nurses as the problem and what the effects are of that shortage. Another example would be ancient civilization flourished, then disintegrated. Effect, the 3 major problems explained for their disintegration. Now there's the problem solution. These are divided into 2 main parts as well. The first one shows the existence and seriousness of a problem, and the second presents a workable solution to the problem. So here, an example would be discussing the problem of puppy mills, and then the second main point would be a possible solution. As I mentioned again, we've already talked about topical order. That's when you basically divide a speech into just logical subtopics. You want it to be consistent and relevant to each other. Because it is pretty applicable to almost any kind of speech and any subject, this is used more often than any of the other orders. So an example would be to explain why the US should continue the space exploration program. So you basically just provide the logical reasons for that. Tips to prepare for your main points. You want to keep main points separate. Each main point should be clearly independent from the others. Do not mix 2 points in one. They should stay divided. So for example, do not say the 3rd step is conducting rehearsals and then performing. That would actually be 3rd and 4th step. So you would say the 3rd step is conducting rehearsals. The 4th step is performing. Here is an example of using pattern of wording for main points. So an ineffective way would be karate gives you better mental discipline. You will become physically stronger through karate. Taking karate lessons will teach you self-defense. There's not like a good flow to that. So you want to keep that same word pattern. Let's look at the more effective example. Karate improves your mental discipline. Karate increases your physical strength. Karate teaches you self-defense. And thirdly, balance the amount of time devoted to main points. Each main point is important. If not, you wouldn't be discussing it. So they all need to receive enough emphasis to be clear and convincing. You want to allow sufficient time devoted to developing each main point. So you don't want to have the first point be very well developed, and let's say you cover it in 2 to 3 minutes, and then the 2 following points are really slim and just covered in 1 minute. Then that means you're not providing and developing each main point enough. Supporting material, we've kind of discussed this in the prior chapters. Really by themselves, the main points are only statements that you're making. Listeners need that supporting material or evidence to accept what you're saying. Supporting materials that we discuss are examples, statistics, and testimony. Today, we are emphasizing the importance of organizing them so that they are directly relevant to the main points that they're supposed to support. Misplaced supporting materials can be confusing for the audience. Here's an example. Let's say that the main point is there are several reasons why people immigrate to the US. A, over the years, millions of people have immigrated to the US. B, for economic opportunity. C, for political freedom. And D, to escape religious persecution. So you'll notice that one of these isn't really relevant to the main point. The reasons why is economic, political, and religious reasons. Point A is not relevant, it's not doing anything to support it. So that is out of place and should not be included. Now let's talk about connectives. These are words or phrases that join one thought of speech to another. They indicate the relationship between them. Without connectives, a speech is disjointed and uncoordinated. There are 4 types of connectives that you want to use: transitions, internal previews, internal summaries, and signposts. Transitions are word or phrase that indicate when the speaker has finished one thought and is moving on to another. It states both the idea that the speaker is ending and the idea that the speaker is coming up to. Here's an example. Now that we have a clear understanding of the problem, let me share the solution. So the underlined sections show that they are finishing one thought and what they're going to be discussing in the next thought. Keeping these points in mind about sign language, let's return to the sentence I started with and see if we can learn the signs for "you are my friend." So notice how these phrases remind the listener of the thought that just completed and reveal the thought about to be developed. Internal previews. These let the audience know what the speaker will speak about next. But these are more detailed than the transitions. It works just like a preview statement in a speech introduction, but it comes in the body of the speech. Notice, in discussing how Asian Americans have been stereotyped in the mass media, we'll look first at the origins of the problem and second at its continuing impact today. After hearing that preview, the audience knows exactly what to listen for as the speaker develops the problem main point. Internal summaries. This is a statement in the body of the speech that summarizes the speaker's preceding points. They are reverse of internal previews because they remind the listener of what they just heard instead of telling them what they're going to hear. Summaries are often used when finishing a complicated or important main point or set of main points. These are excellent ways to clarify and reinforce your ideas. You can combine these with transitions to remind listeners of what they heard, then lead them smoothly into your next point. Here's an example. In short, palm reading is an ancient art, developed in China more than 5,000 years ago. It was practiced in classical Greece and Rome, flourished during the Middle Ages, survived the Industrial Revolution, and remains popular today in many parts of the world. So you'll notice this is summarizing what the speaker had just talked about. Signposts. This is a very brief statement or clue or cue that indicates where a speaker is in the speech, or that focuses attention on key ideas. Usually or frequently, they're just numbers. The first cause of this problem is inefficient agricultural production. The second cause is recurrent drought in the affected countries. So you'll notice first, second, third, those types of phrases. You can also introduce your main points with a question. So how serious is the problem of decaying school buildings? Is it happening in just a few isolated districts, or is it widespread? Now, with these questions, this is something that you can only use in your main points or introduction, but you do not want to use questions for your central idea or for your specific purpose. You can also use signposts to focus attention on key ideas. The most important thing to remember about abstract art is that it is always based on forms in natural world. So you'll notice the most important thing to remember is a signpost telling the audience, I want you to focus on what I'm about to say. Overall, you may want to use 2, 3, or even all 4 kinds of connectives in combination. The important thing is to be aware of what the function of each are. That way you can use them appropriately. Properly applied, these connectives will make your speeches a lot more unified and coherent. Some additional examples of signposts are, be sure to keep this in mind. This is crucial to understand. Above all, you need to know. And that is chapter 9. Thank you.